Hello and welcome to Coding Projects with Mark Lassoff. I am Mark Lassoff and I've got a really cool project for you today. We've got a JavaScript video player. We'll look at the code coming up.
This video is sponsored by Framework Television. Become a certified, competent, and confident developer in just a few months.
About 12 years ago, JavaScript was given the ability to control video with a revision of HTML. Before that, all of the players for video on the web were proprietary. You needed something like Real Video or Flash in order to play video. Well, now those days are over, and as bandwidth has expanded, so have video-based websites. So we're going to be taking a look at video in JavaScript on today's coding projects. Let's get started. So I've already got my app right here. It's running inside a small server, so I have it on localhost 8080. And this very simply can play, pause, stop video, or advance to the next video. So there you see the videos playing. We can pause the video, play from that point. We can stop the video, and it goes back to the beginning. Or we can advance to the next video in the series, which is actually a different video. We've got 4 separate videos here. So this should be enough to take us through the basics of video in JavaScript and HTML5. So we'll start with our index.html. This project's actually made of 3 separate files. We have our HTML file, our CSS file, and of course the heart of our application, the JavaScript file. I have my videos stored here in the videos folder. Now, if you're following along and doing this yourself, you're welcome to use any videos that you want. I'll show you where to replace the file names inside the code when we get there. So looking at the HTML, of course, which is where our user interface is designed, we start with our doc type and the HTML tag, and then we're into the head section of the document, which of course has all of our metadata, like the character set that we're using that happens to be UTF-8. The title tag, I just put in there JavaScript Video Player, and that title appears here in the tab of the web browser. This also would be used if someone bookmarked the page that this was on. This would be the default bookmark name. And the title's also important if your site is indexed by Google. That'll be the primary keyword, so to speak, that Google indexes it under. Then we have these 3 links here. And if you look carefully, these links are all going to somewhere else. The first one is loading a Google font from the Google Font API, and that font is called Roboto. The next 2 are linking up to other CSS style sheets. The first is a normalized style sheet, which essentially sets everything in our CSS to a 0 point. So instead of having to guess what the default style sheet says, this sets margins at 0, padding at 0, all those different things. And then we load up the milligram CSS. This is actually a CSS library or framework called Milligram, which gives us a very simple, clean design automatically. Milligram requires that you have these 3 links in order to use Milligram. And you can see the Milligram styling here with the white on purple and this kind of thin font. That's all from Milligram. It looks pretty good, and I didn't really have to do any custom styles. But I did have to, for the elements I added, add some CSS. So that's in player.css. We'll look at that next. So we have our links to the 3 style sheets required by Milligram. And then we have our link to player.css. And that's all that's in the head of our document. The body is pretty short as well, because all the functionality is actually in our JavaScript here. So I always start by putting everything inside a container. So the logical division container starts on 13 and ends on 28. And when you create a container, what you want to do is create a logical division that holds all of the other components that are part of your application. The reason for this is the body tag actually makes a lousy parent for your different HTML elements. By adding this logical division, this container, that now becomes the parent for all the other elements, and I avoid the problems with body. Then we have our H1, which is the title of the document. You can see that appears right here at the top, Digital Design School. And then we have our video tag. So the video tag here essentially is our video player. It is invisible until I have a source inside it. This source going into the videos folder and loading the file FDD 1.1 M.4, which is a short lesson from another course that we have. That actual video is loaded into the player when the program loads up. So it gives us an initial video here. But I did not select to have any video controls. There are actually default video controls that we can add by adding the controls equals controls attribute and value pair. When I run this now, you'll see now it's got these video controls, but I don't want those because I'm using my own JavaScript controls. So we can take that out. Those controls are available in every browser, but the way they look is going to differ slightly from browser to browser. But every browser now can add video controls to any element, to any video content inside a video tag. All right, so we got rid of that. Let's save and refresh. Okay, so there is our closing video tag with our source inside it. And then we have these two output tags, time 0 and video 1 out of 4. This tag appears here. There's the time tag. There's the video tag. And these output tags are designed for information that's going to be output dynamically. So what's inside here, this one ID'd as timeout and this one ID'd as vidnum, is going to change. It's actually going to be updated by the JavaScript. This time is going to display the actual time in the video. I'm going to turn the volume down there. So it's displaying the time elapsed. And this video display here, as I click next video, that changes as well. So that's why I put those in output tags, because it would be output essentially by the JavaScript. All right, so then I have a logical division where I have my play buttons. And that logical division is encased in this gray rectangle with the rounded corners. And inside there I have 3 buttons, play, pause, and stop. Notice that I gave them each IDs, btn play, btn pause, and btn stop. You have to create IDs for any HTML element that's going to be accessed by the JavaScript. The JavaScript doesn't know about your HTML and vice versa. It's through these ID attributes that I'll be able to bring these elements into the JavaScript in a few moments. I'll show you exactly how that's done. But for right now, just know that the IDs are necessary in order to link to the JavaScript. So I ID'd them as btn play, btn pause, and btn stop. Note how I created IDs that you can kind of tell what the items are just from the text. That's on purpose. So all my buttons are prepended with btn. That makes the JavaScript a little bit easier. All right, so we have our 3 buttons. You can see them here, play, pause, and stop. And then I have a separate div for my next buttons. Initially, I was thinking of doing a previous video button, but then I decided that was kind of silly. So we just did the next button. And that's ID'd as btn next. Again, prepending the ID with btn, so it's easily identifiable. And that's pretty much the end of the user interface. Not a whole lot going on here, just a few components. But on line 30 is something important. This is the link to our player.js. So this links to our JavaScript file, which is right here. Before we look at the JavaScript, let's quickly take a look at our CSS. You'll remember that we linked to my own CSS file called player.css. So let's open that in our Atom text editor. And let's see, we need to be in JS Video Player, and there is player.css. And here, I didn't do a whole lot. first on the container, which I talked about before, I made sure that container goes all the way around. I gave it a padding of 10 pixels. I don't like when the elements get right up to the edge of the browser, so I gave it a 10 pixel padding for some breathing room all around our components. Around the play buttons div and the next buttons div, this puts our light gray rectangle. That also has a padding of 10. It has a 1 pixel wide solid gray border, a border radius of 5, which gives it that rounded rectangle style, round corners, and then a margin at the bottom of 20 pixels to separate the two. So that's these gray squares that group the buttons. My video is the video player, and I just wanted that to have a width of 100% to go all the way across the interface. Video number, that's this guy over here. I floated that to the right, so these would line up with the time on the left and the video number on the right. And then the default buttons in milligram don't go all the way across. I like my buttons to work for the fat-fingered among us, so I always have my buttons go all the way across the interface, which actually works much better on mobile. Okay, so that's the CSS. Now let's get to the heart of our actual document, which is the JavaScript. This is what actually makes things work. So at the top of the JavaScript, I'm creating references to all of the relevant parts of the interface. So the first constant, which is called myVideo, references the video player. Document, getElement by ID, myVideo. So you remember if we go back to the HTML, the video player, there's the ID myVideo. So that reference in the JavaScript, getElement by ID myVideo, brings this video player element into the JavaScript and makes it identifiable as myVideo. We did the same thing with the 3 buttons. There's BTN play, BTN pause, and BTN stop. So that created references to, in the interface, the play button, the pause button, and the stop button. Constant BTN play is assigned document getElement by ID BTN play. So if we look again at the HTML, there's the ID BTN play. We're assigning this element to the JavaScript variable BTN play. Now, by the way, I could have given these different names, but I gave them the same variable names here. Just thought that would make it less confusing. So same thing with BTN pause. Constant BTN pause is assigned document getElement by ID BTN pause. And then, of course, we did the same thing with the stop button. We also have 2 other things in the interface we need to access. The timeout, which is here, the time output, and the video number output, which is here. So those are both also accessed with document getElement by ID, and then taking the ID that I used in the HTML. So timeout was the ID for the output for the time, and vidnum was the ID for the output for the video number, right? We're changing that now. So that's vidnum, and in the JavaScript, vidnum out. This project requires a timer because we update the user interface with the time as the video is playing. So initially, I created that timer variable, and I set it to null. All right, so now we need to, in this next section, make our buttons actually do something. Because here we've retrieved the buttons, but we haven't told the buttons what to do. So the buttons respond to an event, right? When we click the play button, we want the video to play. And we can see here by the timer, and eventually here, the video is playing. So on the play button, I added an event listener that does just what it sounds like it does. It listens for an event. The event it's listening for is called click, which is the same thing as touch on a mobile device. That would also fire the click event. And that calls a function called vidAction. In fact, hitting the pause button, the click event also fires the vidAction function. Notice that starts on line 19. And for the stop button, the click action calls the vid action function. So all three of these buttons fire the same function. And that's because I'm handling playing the video, pausing the video, and stopping the video in one function. I thought it would be silly to write three separate functions for play, stop, and pause. That's not a lot of functionality. I thought it was better encapsulated in a single function. There's two other events that we're worried about here. BTN next means someone has clicked the next video button, and that fires the next video function. And then ended is on the My Video, right? The video player. What this means is when the ended event fires, means the video has ended, we'll call a function called vidEnded. JavaScript can actually detect when a video has ended. There's a video ended event, so that's what we're listening for. And when that video ended event occurs, we call the function vidEnded, which allows us to go on to the next video automatically. Okay, so now here on line 16, here I'm declaring an array. It's a constant, so it's not going to change. And I'm declaring an array called vids, and this contains the file names of the videos that we're playing. These are all in a folder called videos, and these are the individual file names. So if you wanted to run your own videos between the quotes, replace these file names with the file names of your videos and put them inside the videos folder. Should work just fine. I also have a variable that keeps track of the video that's playing. We start with video 0. This is video 0. This is video 1, and so on. Because it's an array, we always start counting with 0. So that refers to the first video, video 0. All right, so that's all the setup. So once JavaScript reads these 17 lines of code, we're essentially set up and nothing else happens until there's an event, because JavaScript's an event-driven language. So it's going to sit now and wait for a click event on one of the buttons. And when there's a click event on one of the buttons, the appropriate callback function is going to run. So assume it's play, pause, or stop, then the appropriate function is going to run to deal with that. So the vid action function that starts on line 19 is what deals with the play, pause, or stop button being clicked. So the function is called vid action, and notice this event object that's passed to it. The event object has all the information about the event that occurred, in this case, the click event. So when I press play, that click event gets passed into the function. And it tells us a lot of different things. It tells us where the button was clicked. It timestamps it. It tells you whether the control key or the shift key was held down. So there's a lot of information in that event. And one of the pieces of information in that event is the ID of the element clicked. So now we're back to those IDs, BTN play, BTN pause, and BTN stop. So that ID is passed through the event object as event.target.id. This is how I can tell which object has been clicked that's caused this function to fire. So through the event here, we'll get the ID. If it's BTN play, the play button, we'll call the play video function. We'll start the timer, which calls the update function every 100 milliseconds. I'll talk about that in a minute. It does that with the set interval function, and then it assigns that timer to a variable called timer, and then we have a break to get out of the case function here. If it's BTN pause, we call myVideo.pause, myVideo being the player, and we simply call the pause function, which is part of JavaScript. The pause function pauses video or audio. And here again, it's on the myVideo object. In case it's stop, we again call pause. Surprisingly, there's no stop function in JavaScript. So if we want to stop a piece of media, this works the same for video or audio. We've got to pause it and then reset the playhead to the beginning of the media. So we do that with the current time property. Let's take a look. myVideo.current current time equals 0. So essentially we're moving back to the 0th second of the video. So those are our three options, right? If vid action is running, it's either been the play button, the pause button, or the stop button, and we'll react accordingly. Pause and stop are self-contained. Pause just pauses the video. Stop pauses the video and then sets the playhead back to 0. So you notice if I play a little bit here, and I hit stop, we're back to 0 on the timer. The BTN play button calls a play video function. Here's the play video function on line 35. That on the video player calls the play function that plays the video and starts our timer. The timer calls the update function every 100 milliseconds. So set interval has two arguments. The first argument is the function you want to call at the interval. In this case, it's the update function on line 40. The second argument is how often we want to call it. We want to call it every 100 milliseconds. So now this update function here runs every 100 milliseconds. Its job is to update the user interface, specifically this part of the user interface that has our time. So the way it does that is it sets the inner HTML property of this output, which is this area right here, to the string time. It gets the current time of the video, which is going to be in seconds. So 1 second, 2 seconds, and sends that to the myTime function. The myTime function is not a function I wrote. It's a function that is designed to convert seconds to minutes and seconds in a way that human beings can read it in the standard minute, second format you're used to. You can see that at work right here, right? It divides the hour by 3600, etc., doing the math until we get hours, minutes, and seconds, inserting the colons and zeros when appropriate. This returns this formatted time that you see right here, right? 0:00 or 2:09. This function is taking just straight seconds. So let's say we had 129 seconds. It's converted that to 2:09, because you're used to seeing that as 2 minutes, 9 seconds instead of 129 seconds. So that's what that function is doing. So that function takes the current time we're at in the video and the duration of the video. The duration property tells us how long it is, and it sets up this string right here. And again, this is being updated every 100 milliseconds based on where we are in the video. And this will, of course, go all the way to 2:09, in which case it's going to reset because the next video will play. Okay, so the vid ended event runs when the video ends, right? When it gets all the way to the end. And this is run because we have this function, if you remember, listening to the video player for the ended event and calling the vid ended function. So this function is called, we stop the timer. That's what line 58 does, stops the timer. We reset the timer display by taking timeouts inner HTML and just putting timer 0 like it does when you first load the program. So right here, that resets to 0 when the vid ends. We call the next video function and the play video function, which we already went over. Remember, the play video function just plays the video and starts the timer. The last function we're worried about here is the next video function. And that runs right when the next video button is clicked or when the video's ended. So there's two different ways this function can run. And what it does is it determines which video is playing, and it makes sure that number's less than 3. Why? Because remember our array? 0, 1, 2, 3. Better way to do this actually would have been to put here vids.length. So this way it measures the length of that array. This way it would work even if we changed the length of the array. But the way I had it, because I wanted to make it obvious, right, we were just counting out. There were 4, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So if it's less than 3, then the vids playing variable will add 1 to it. So if video 0 is playing, it'll then be 1 or 2 or 3. But again, 3 is equal to 3. So in that case, this would be false, and we'd reset it to 0. So the only possible numbers that vid playing can hold is 0, 1, 2, or 3. Because if it's more than 3, this guy's going to take effect, and we're going to reset it to 0 and go back to the first video. Which is why if you watch right there, from video 4, when I click next video, it goes back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's because here in the display where we update that, right here, I'm adding 1, because I don't want that to say 0 to the user. So we display to the user whatever video is playing plus 1 out of 4. And that's how our video player works, designed in JavaScript. There's a lot you can do with this. And there's actually more video events you can detect if you read the documentation for JavaScript. But this should give you a good beginning. You could build your own YouTube with this. I do hope you enjoyed this project and were able to code along. I'm Mark Lassoff. I'll see you next time on Coding Projects.